She fell asleep in a library corner, craggling a book about the family that unknowingly abandoned her. When the CEO found her, he saw more than a stranger. He saw his past. But what if the girl he just met is the key to a secret his family buried decades ago, and to a future neither imagined? Before we dive into this unforgettable journey, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? If stories about love, sacrifice, and second chances speak to your heart, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we're bringing you another powerful story you won't want to miss. The rain had been falling steadily all night, tapping against the tall windows of the Marigold Library like a lullaby for the weary. Inside, the building was nearly empty, save for the faint glow of a desk lamp in the eastern reading room. Rows of antique books loomed silently, their spines gleaming with the sheen of history. And there, curled into one of the oversized armchairs, lay Eliana Cruz, her dark curls slightly damp from the rain, her cardigan slipping from one shoulder as she drifted into sleep. Eliana, 25, worked the late shift most nights. The quiet suited her. In a world full of noise and questions she didn't want to answer, the library was her refuge. No one here asked why she never spoke of her past. No one cared that she clutched a locket during her breaks or that she checked out the same dusty genealogy books again and again. She was just the girl who restocked shelves, arranged archives, and disappeared before sunrise. That night, she'd lost track of time, reading a rare historical volume 1 about the Blackwell family legacy. Her fingers had traced the names, pausing on one that felt strangely familiar, Estelle Blackwell. She didn't know why it stirred something in her, but it did. The next thing she remembered was the book slipping from her lap as sleep pulled her under. Unbeknownst to her, the library wasn't entirely empty. Gabriel Blackwell was late again. The funding meeting at the local university had run long, and he hated surprises. When his head of philanthropy told him the Marigold Library had filed an unusual request, grant money to restore the Blackwell collection, he decided to investigate in person. No one else would have dared to walk into a public library at 11:30 p.m. in a tailored black suit, but Gabriel wasn't anyone else. He moved through the marble halls like a man trained to command silence. But as he passed the eastern reading room, something made him stop. A melody, soft, wavering, barely audible. A lullaby. He stepped closer and saw her. A woman in an armchair, sleeping peacefully, the forgotten book still open in her lap. He didn't know her name, but her face was gentle, full of something he hadn't seen in years. Peace. He should have turned away, should have woken her up with a scolding, or called security to deal with the breach of protocol. But instead he stood there, frozen, listening. The tune she hummed, she was still half asleep, was the exact melody his mother had sung to him as a child. A melody she claimed had been passed down from generations before. His throat tightened without warning. That was impossible. Coincidence? And yet, he reached for the book she had been reading. The Blackwell Bloodline, Generations of Influence. She'd been on the page about his grandmother. Gabriel narrowed his eyes. This wasn't just a sleepy librarian. She was studying his family. Without another word, he replaced the book carefully in her lap, turned, and walked away, but not without one final glance over his shoulder. He didn't know why the image of her stayed with him as he stepped back into the rain, or why the sound of that lullaby echoed louder in his memory than it ever had before. He just knew it wasn't the last time he'd see her. The next morning, Eliana woke with a stiff neck and an ache behind her eyes. She blinked at the soft light filtering through the windows, surprised to see the sun already rising. The reading room was empty, the book still in her lap, but something felt different, as if the air had shifted during the night. She sat up slowly and noticed a faint outline of water on the floor, boot prints that trailed toward the exit, barely visible but unmistakably real. Someone had been here, but why hadn't they woken her? As she placed the book back on the cart, her hand brushed a folded sheet of paper. A grant proposal, she realized, left by one of the library's staff for her supervisor. She glanced at the heading, Blackwell Philanthropic Board. Her stomach tightened. The name had appeared too many times lately. Later that day, during her break, she returned to the archives. She sat in the corner where the light was softest and pulled out her notebook. the one where she'd been quietly sketching names, dates, and theories for months. Her grandmother had always spoken in riddles about her past. "Some truths are tucked inside books," she used to say. "You just have to know which one." She flipped to a page marked with a torn scrap of fabric. There, in pencil, she had written the same name over and over. Estelle. It was always the same name, the same question. Why did she remember that name from childhood? Why had it echoed in her dreams? She didn't know her mother was. She'd grown up in a convent after being left at its door as a baby. The nuns had called her Eliana, and a kind librarian had taken her in as a foster child. That librarian, her grandmother, had passed away 2 years ago, but Eliana still followed the same rituals: morning tea, whispered prayers, and night-hedging journaling. And the lullaby, always the lullaby. It was the only thread connecting her to the woman who'd left her behind. TV videos. That evening, as she restocked a new shipment of donated books, her phone buzzed. A library-wide email, subject line, "Guile, Guile, Guy." Active close quotation. Their eyes narrowed. She scrolled through the list of sponsors and froze when she saw the name. Gabriel Blackwell. She recognized it at first, but something clicked. She remembered a photo she'd once seen years ago in a newspaper clipping tucked inside one of the genealogy books. A boy in a suit, standing beside a woman with dark eyes and a wistful smile. Margaret Blackwell and her youngest son, Gabriel. Eliana stood completely still. The same woman who once composed the lullaby. The same one who disappeared from public life for nearly a year before re-emerging with no explanation. And now, her son, the CEO of the very corporation funding Eliana's library, had seen her sleeping next to his family's legacy. Was it possible? Could they be connected in some way? More than coincidence. She shook the thought from her head. It was ridiculous. And yet, why couldn't she let it go? That night, she stayed behind again after closing, unable to pull herself away from the archives. She stared at the names on the Blackwell family tree, wondering where she fit in the world, if she fit at all. And outside, leaning against his car beneath the flickering street lamp, Gabriel Blackwell stared up at the library windows, watching, waiting. Because something about her, about the name Eliana Cruz, the eyes that mirrored his mother's, the tune that lived in his memory, refused to let him go. Not anymore. Eliana Cruz was stacking the last few returned books in the history section when the creak of the front door startled her. It was after hours, and the library had been officially closed for nearly 20 minutes. She turned around, her fingers still wrapped around a worn, leather-bound volume, and saw him, Gabriel Blackwell, stepping inside again. This time, he wasn't wearing the tailored overcoat from before. His sleeves were rolled up, his expression unreadable, and his presence still as commanding as the rain that had battered the windows hours earlier. "I'm sorry," Eliana said immediately, smoothing her cardigan. "I didn't realize anyone was still here earlier. I didn't mean to fall asleep." "Hector, I'm not here to scold you," Gabriel said, his voice lower than she remembered. "Actually, I came back for a recommendation. Something rare. Thought you might be the person to ask." Eliana blinked, unsure if he was serious. But he waited, patiently, eyes not leaving hers. She nodded slowly and led him toward the back shelves, where the rare collection lived, volumes forgotten by most patrons, but not by her. "Do you prefer fiction or nonfiction?" She scanned the spines and gently slid out the mapmaker's silence. "This one doesn't exist in most public records. It's about a cartographer who encoded his personal grief into every coastline he ever drew. Some say the world map is just his love story, drawn across oceans." Gabriel took the book, running a thumb across the gold-stamped cover. "Did you memorize that from the jacket?" Eliana shook her head. "No. I read it." He smiled for the first time. It wasn't a grand gesture, just a soft flicker of something at the edge of his otherwise cool demeanor. "You're wasted behind this counter," he murmured. "I like it here," she said. "Books don't pretend to be what they're not." Gabriel tilted his head. "People do?" Eliana didn't answer, but her silence was enough. She looked down, tracing her finger along the bookshelf's edge, trying to hide the sudden pulse in her chest. Then, Gabriel pulled out a thin folder from under his arm. "This is unrelated," he said, handing it to her. "It's a speech I'm preparing for the Blackwell Foundation's annual gala. I've written 5 times and hate every version. You seem like someone who knows what matters between the lines. Will you read it?" She hesitated, unsure if he was serious or just testing her. "Don't want me to edit a CEO's. I want someone honest to tell me if it's empty." Eliana finally nodded. "All right." She took it home that night, clutching it like it weighed more than it should, and by the time she returned 2 days later, she had written out thoughtful edits in blue ink, including one note that simply said, "This part sounds like armor." Gabriel read that note 3 times. From that moment, the air between them began to shift. Staff began to whisper behind dusty shelves. "Why is he always in her section? Did you see them yesterday, near the archives? I thought she was just part-time." Eliana pretended not to hear, but every time she turned a corner and found Gabriel standing there, pretending to browse, she felt it too, something quiet and strange blooming between the shelves. One night, when the library was empty and silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, Eliana sat alone at a table with a small, worn photograph in her lap. A woman smiled back at her in the faded image. "Mama Rosa," Eliana whispered. But what always struck her wasn't the woman. It was her own eyes. They didn't match Rosa's. They matched the Blackwells. Gabriel didn't ask about the photograph the next morning when he saw Eliana in the archive room, sorting through a pile of old donation records. But he watched the way she tucked the image into her worn leather notebook, the corners frayed, her fingers lingering over it like a prayer. He leaned against the doorframe. "Long night?" She didn't jump. She was getting used to his quiet entrances, cataloging donations from the 1960s, most of its dust and mildew. He walked toward her and set a steaming paper cup beside her elbow. "Cinnamon tea, the same kind you ordered last week." Her eyes widened. "You remembered?" "Forget names sometimes, but not people who rewrite my speeches." That made her laugh, soft and breathy. "Did the board approve it?" Though one of them said, "Your edits made me sound too human." She tilted her head. "And that's bad?" "Depends who you ask." There was a silence between them, filled only by the rustling of papers and the distant hum of the library's ventilation. Then Gabriel sat across from her. "You know," he said slowly, "I used to come here as a boy. My mother would sit by the stained glass window near the east wing and read poetry aloud to me. Sometimes I wonder if that's the last place I ever really knew her." Eliana froze. Her heart stumbled in her chest. "She loved this library," Gabriel continued. "Donated a section of rare books before she got sick. After she died, I couldn't come back for years." Eliana looked up from the box of files. "And now?" He met her gaze. "Now I see you here, and for some reason, it feels like I was meant to." Eliana opened her mouth, then closed it. Words didn't come easily when her pulse was pounding this hard, so instead, she reached for another file. But Gabriel reached too, his fingers brushing hers, stopping her. "Who raised you, Eliana?" She blinked, her lips parting slightly. She hadn't expected the question, not so directly. "A woman named Rosa Delgado," she said quietly. "She found me on the steps of a convent just outside the city. No note, no last name. The sisters said I didn't cry much. I just stared." Gabriel's brows drew together, slowly. "You were left at a convent? You've never known who your biological mother was?" She shook her head. "Mama Rosa gave me everything she had, but I always wondered where I came from, why someone would leave a baby like that." Gabriel leaned back slightly, his expression unreadable. "And now?" "Right now," Eliana whispered. "But sometimes I dream of a woman I've never met," she sings, "the same lullaby I hum without realizing. And sometimes I think, maybe I knew her once. Maybe I still do, somehow." They sat in silence again, and this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of memory, of longing. Something unspoken that wove between them like a thread pulled taut. Outside, The first flakes of snow began to fall, clinging to the tall, arched windows. Inside, beneath the glow of old chandeliers and the scent of paper and cinnamon, two lives paused, just long enough to begin unraveling the truth. Later that evening, as Eliana closed up, she passed by a hallway she usually ignored. Her eyes drifted to a series of portraits, Blackwell ancestors, lined in frames. She stopped cold in front of the last one. The woman in the portrait had eyes like hers, the same softness, the same curve in the cheekbone, the same quiet sorrow. The placard read, "Margaret Blackwell." Eliana didn't move for a long time. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached out and traced the edge of the frame. Then she whispered, "Who were you to me?" And somewhere behind her, unseen but present, Gabriel had stopped walking too. Gabriel stared at the photograph, the edges yellowed with time, the faces frozen in a moment of celebration. It was a family garden party, his grandfather's birthday, he recalled vaguely. Everyone was dressed in their finest, smiling toward the camera. But one figure made his hand tighten around the frame. There, off to the side, almost hidden near the rose trellis, stood a young woman in a modest dress, holding a tray. Her eyes were downcast, but her features were unmistakable. It was Eliana, or someone who looked exactly like her. His breath caught as a chill ran down his spine. He'd seen the resemblance before, in gestures, glances, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, but this was different. This wasn't a coincidence. This was history, whispering, begging to be heard. Later that day, he returned to the library and found Eliana cataloging books behind the desk, her head bowed over a new stack. She looked up at the sound of his approach, and the moment their eyes met, he knew. She saw the truth in his face before he found this, he said, sliding the photograph gently across the counter. "Do you recognize her?" Eliana's breath hitched. She reached out with trembling fingers, staring at the image, her eyes locked onto the woman by the trellis. "That's her," she whispered. "Mama Rosa. At least that's what I always called her." Gabriel blinked. "That's your mother?" "She raised me," Eliana said quietly. "She never said she was my birth mother, but she never said she wasn't, either. All I had was this." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small, worn bracelet wrapped in tissue. Faded letters spelled out a single word, Blackwell. "Date." She said it was mine, that I was born in a hospital upstate. That one night, someone came for her, and we left, no goodbye, no explanations. Gabriel's mind reeled. "Rosa was a nurse once," he said, "and before that, she was a maid in our household. My father mentioned her once, said she left suddenly, years ago." Eliana lowered her gaze. "She told me we had to hide, that no one could know. I didn't understand, I still don't." He leaned closer. "What if the story you were told was only half of it?" Together, they sat in the library's private research room, the door closed to the world. Gabriel typed into old databases, scanned through family employee records, hospital rosters, and news archives. Hours passed like minutes. Then, finally, a breakthrough. A scanned article from a local paper appeared on screen. "Blackwell family nurse disappears amid rumors of scandal." Gabriel clicked it open. The article was vague but damning, mentioning Rosa by name, referencing whispers of a child, a family member's indiscretion, and a swift disappearance. The last line burned itself into his vision. "Sources confirm, no charges filed, matter closed quietly by the family's legal counsel." Eliana sat frozen, her voice barely a breath. She gave up everything. For me. And she must have been terrified, Gabriel said. And brave. So brave. Eliana's voice cracked. "I've spent my life wondering who I was, why I felt like a ghost in every room I entered. But now, it's like a door just opened inside me. And you were standing on the other side." Gabriel closed the laptop slowly, letting the silence settle between them. Outside, the sun had long disappeared, and the glow from the library lamps cast warm light over Eliana's stunned expression. She was still holding the photo, her fingers tracing the image of Rosa again and again, like trying to draw strength from it. "I used to say," Eliana murmured, that the world wasn't kind to people who didn't belong to it, that we had to carve out a little corner and make it ours. I thought she meant being poor or adopted, but now I understand. She was hiding a war behind her smile. Gabriel watched her closely. You belonged all along, Eliana. You just didn't know it. She laughed, but it broke midway. Do I belong? I was the child they wanted to erase. The child she gave everything up for. If your family had their way, I wouldn't even exist. He didn't flinch. That's not my family's choice anymore. Eliana set the photograph down gently. I don't want pity or inheritance. I need truth. Then let's find the rest of it, Gabriel said. No lawyers, no legacy, just two people chasing a name and a heartbeat. They left the library that night and drove north, to the hospital Rosa once mentioned in bedtime stories. The place with the blue roof and the smell of rain. It took hours of searching through old microfilm and dusty logbooks, but finally they found it. A delivery record from the year Eliana was born. No last name, just baby girl and Mother Rosa. But the note in the margin was what made Gabriel go still. It read, patient refused to name father, requested anonymity, assisted departure arranged privately. A deep ache pressed behind Eliana's ribs. She never wanted to leave. She had to. They stepped outside into the early morning light. The sky was soft gray, and everything smelled of damp grass and distant lilacs. Gabriel turned toward her slowly, uncertain of it. Liliana, he said, you are not a scandal. You're not some shadow Rosa ran with. You are what she protected. She looked away. And who does that make me now? A maid's daughter? A forgotten secret? Gabriel stepped closer. No, you're Eliana Cruz. You're brilliant, kind, and maybe you're part of a story that isn't over yet. Her voice shook. I don't know how to be part of a story. He offered a small smile. You already are. As they drove back, Eliana sat quietly with the bracelet in her hand, the beads warm from her palm. She thought of all the nights she'd stayed awake, wondering where she came from, wondering why she didn't look like the kids at school, why Rosa cried when she thought Eliana wasn't watching. And now she had answers. But answers were heavy, and truth didn't erase pain. It just held it up to the light. Back at the library, Eliana stood before the portrait of Margaret Blackwell, Gabriel's grandmother. The resemblance was faint, but undeniable. The curve of the cheek, the set of the eyes. She touched the frame lightly. To known, she whispered. Gabriel stood behind her. She would have loved you. Eliana turned to face him. Thank you for not looking away. His reply came gently. I couldn't, not from the moment I heard you hum that lullaby. Her eyes brimmed, but she didn't cry. Not this time. This time she stood still, anchored. Rain lashed against the tall windows of the Blackwell estate as Gabriel sat in his study, holding a copy of the Blackwell lineage binder. The photo of Rosa Cruz, tucked inside the last section of unverified names, glared up at him like a buried truth begging to breathe. Across town, Eliana paced inside the librarian break room, her fingers clenching the worn edges of the bracelet marked Blackwell. The name, once a faint whisper in the corners of her identity, now screamed in every heartbeat. Rosa Cruz, her mother, had been part of Gabriel's family household, and somewhere along the way, the truth had been erased. That afternoon, Gabriel decided to return to the archive building at the back of his family's estate, a space untouched since the death of his grandfather. Dust lined the thick mahogany shelves, and cobwebs draped the corners of old filing cabinets. He moved with purpose, hands trembling as he sifted through yellowing documents, flipping through decades of servants' records, hospital bills, and donation ledgers. And then he froze. Inside a red folder labeled House Staff, 1999, he found it, a birth record filed under the name Cruz Rosa. It listed the birth of a female child, father unknown. Notes: employee requested confidentiality, infant transferred to private convent care. The attached copy of a hospital form bore a signature he recognized immediately: Margaret Blackwell, his mother. Before he could scan the file, a loud crack echoed through the archive hall. Smoke. He turned around. Orange sparks glowed from a far corner where a circuit box hissed and sizzled. Fire climbed the aging walls, hungry and fast. Without hesitation, Gabriel grabbed the folder, clutching it to his chest as he raced toward the door. Flames danced along the shelves beside him. Just as he reached the threshold, a loud pop sent glass shards raining behind him. He stumbled out, coughing, ash streaking his face, but the file, Eliana's truth. Back at Eliana's apartment that evening, she opened the door to find him standing in the rain, suit still on his collar, eyes wide with something raw and urgent. "I have something for you," he said quietly, handing her the folder wrapped in a damp blazer. Eliana stared at it for a long moment before her hands finally moved. She unwrapped the blazer, her breath catching as her fingers touched the folder's scorched edges. When she saw her mother's name, Rosa Cruz, listed in ink, she sank into the nearest chair, her lips trembling. "She never told me," she whispered, voice breaking. "She protected me, but at what cost?" Gabriel pulled a chair beside her. "Your mother wasn't hiding you from your past, Eliana. She was shielding you from the people who buried it." She turned toward him, eyes filled with pain and wonder. "You risked your life to get this." He didn't hesitate. "You deserve to know where you come from, even if it changes where I'm going." They sat in silence as thunder rolled overhead. Eliana opened the folder slowly, page by page, drinking in the pieces of a puzzle that once left her feeling like she'd been born into the wrong world. Medical notations, letters of reference, a photo of Rosa in a Blackwell uniform holding a new bogan, Rosa and a pale green. Tears slid down Eliana's cheeks as she reached for Gabriel's hand. His fingers didn't flinch. Outside, the storm began to pass. But inside that small room filled with pages and truth, something larger had just been set free. Hours passed, but Eliana didn't move from her seat. She read each document as if it were the last thread connecting her to a mother who'd silently sacrificed everything. Her fingers trembled as she reached a crumpled letter Rosa had never mailed. It was addressed simply, "For when she asks." "I left because they asked me to disappear, but I stayed close. I watched you grow up, even if from a distance. I knew someday the Blackwell name would echo in your bones, and I prayed you'd find it before it broke you." Eliana pressed the page to her chest. "She never told me, never made me feel like I was missing anything. And yet," her voice caught, "there was always something hollow." Gabriel remained by her side, the flicker of a desk lamp casting golden warmth over the two of them. He watched her breathe, process, break, and heal, all within the span of a heartbeat. "She breathed you with love," he said gently, "but they raised me with fear. Maybe we're the ones meant to break the cycle." Eliana glanced at him, her voice softer now. "But what happens now, Gabriel? What does this make me to you?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he rose and walked over to her, kneeling by her side. "It makes you exactly who you've always been, brilliant, brave, and yours. I didn't come here tonight because of the documents or the name. I came because I wanted to witness you knowing your worth." Tears welled in her eyes again, not from grief this time, but from something deeper. Recognition, relief, belonging. Gabriel stood and extended a hand. "Come with me." He led her outside. The rain had stopped, leaving the world hushed, reflective. The streetlights reflected off puddles like mirrors into something softer. He walked her past the corner of the library, now closed for the night, to a bench under a weeping willow tree. From his pocket, he pulled out something she hadn't expected. A faded photograph. The same one he'd seen in the family archives. The one where a younger Rosa Cruz stood beside Margaret Blackwell. But he wasn't just a maid, he said, voice taut with emotion. She was our mother's friend, maybe even her savior. Eliana reached for the photo, then paused. "Do you think she regretted it, giving me away?" Gabriel answered. "I think she fought for you the only way she could, and I think, if she were here tonight, she'd be proud. You've lived a life of honesty, of work, of integrity, and now you're standing on your own roots." Eliana smiled faintly, her fingers brushing the edges of the photo. "You know, for a long time I thought my story was just about survival. But maybe Maybe it's always been about return. They sat quietly beneath the tree, the scent of wet earth and old books lingering in the air. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of answers, of scars, of beginnings. When they finally stood, Eliana looked toward the city skyline, her voice steady. "Thank you, Gabriel. Not just for finding the file, but for staying." His reply was simple. Some people are worth staying for. As they walked back, shoulder to shoulder, the world around them felt changed, not because the truth had rewritten their past, but because it had finally set them free to imagine a future. A future where secrets didn't silence, where family meant choice, and where a lost name had finally found its place. Ink, in history, and in her heart. The ballroom shimmered in candlelight and crystal, but Eliana Cruz stood at the edge, clutching the skirt of her borrowed dress like armor. It had once belonged to her adoptive mother, Mama Rosa, modest, slightly faded but meaningful. As she stepped inside, the buzz of conversation dimmed, eyes turning not with admiration but with confusion. Whispers followed her like shadows. Gabriel, already waiting near the stage in his tailored tuxedo, caught her eyes across the crowd. Relief flickered across his face. He moved toward her, his confidence unwavering, as if shielding her with every step. "You made it," he said softly, eyes scanning her face. She nodded. "I almost didn't." "In your head? You look beautiful." The lady broke. She wanted to believe him, but the stares burned more than his kindness soothed. Still, she forced a smile and followed him as he guided her into the heart of the event. The gala was to raise funds for literacy and restoration programs, but for Eliana, it felt like a test, one she wasn't sure she belonged in. Halfway through the evening, a sharply dressed older woman stepped in front of her. Her diamonds sparkled under the chandelier's glow, but her tone cut colder than winter wind. "You're her ghost," she murmured, her eyes narrowing as she leaned in. Eliana blinked. "Excuse me?" "Be carefully." "You look just like her," Rosa, the maid, who thought she could rewrite bloodlines. It was Helen Blackwell. Eliana's lips parted, stunned. Before she could reply, the woman walked away, her comment leaving a silence far louder than music. "Eliana," Gabriel returned, sensing her sudden stillness. She tried to swallow it, tried to breathe past it. "Your aunt. She called me a ghost." His jaw tightened. She shouldn't have said that. "It's not just her," Eliana whispered, glancing around. "They're all staring like I wandered in through the servant's door." Gabriel touched her arm gently. "You belong here?" But his voice, kind as it was, couldn't unhear the next moment. Her eyes widened. "Witness that last name?" someone said behind her. A woman in gold, wine glass trembling in hand, leaned toward a friend. "Cruz, right? The scandal years ago. Wasn't there a housemaid who ran off with—" Eliana didn't wait to hear the rest. She turned and fled. Eliana burst through the double doors into the garden, the night air cool against her flushed cheeks. The marble terrace stretched empty, save for the whisper of wind rustling through the hedges. She gripped the balustrade, knuckles white, her chest rising and falling in shallow, panicked breaths. Everything she feared was true. They didn't see her as a guest. They saw her as a scandal reborn, a forgotten secret walking among them. "I don't belong in your world," she whispered to the sky, blinking back tears. "I was never meant to be here." The garden path creaked, footsteps. She didn't turn. "Hi, the seas, I thought I'd find you here." Gabriel's voice came gently behind her. "You always escape to where the books are quietest." She wiped her face quickly and faced him, her eyes red but defiant. "You'd know who I am, or who they think I am, and I don't want to be Rosa's ghost. I just wanted to find my truth." Gabriel walked closer but didn't reach for her. "And you did. You found it." "What cost?" Her voice cracked. "I didn't ask to be born into this. I didn't ask for secrets or scandals, or to be judged in rooms like these." "You weren't born for their judgment," he said. "You were born for your own story." She looked away, arms hugging herself. "It's easier to run. It always has been." "You didn't run from the past," he said. "You faced it, and maybe tonight, you're not the one who should be ashamed." That made her pause. He slowly stepped forward, and when she didn't move away, he reached for her hand. "Eliana, I know the world I come from, the walls it builds, the doors it locks." She looked up at him, eyes glassy. "Then why bring me in just to watch me fall?" "I didn't bring you in to watch you fall," he whispered. "I brought you in because I wanted to stand beside you, no matter where we landed." A silence passed between them. Then he lifted her hand and kissed it, softly, slowly, like sealing a promise. "You don't belong in my world," Gabriel said. "Then I'll come into yours." Eliana closed her eyes. No promises, no grand declarations. Just that simple, shattering truth. Eliana sat alone at the library window, the DNA envelope in her lap, unopened, her fingers trembling slightly. Rain streaked across the glass like ink on parchment. It had arrived that morning, confirmation or collapse in a single sheet. She exhaled deeply, thinking of Gabriel's eyes when he placed it in her hands. "No matter what it says," he'd whispered, "you're already part of this story." She opened it. Positive, 99.9% match to Margaret Blackwell's bloodline. The words swam before her eyes, blurry through tears she hadn't meant to shed. Her entire life had been shadowed in uncertainty. Now she had an answer. But it came with a cost. A legacy marred by secrecy. A grandmother she'd never met. A family that tried to erase her. Gabriel was already at the library when she emerged from the back room, his coat wet from the storm. He stood silently, watching her approach with the envelope in hand. "She was my grandmother," Eliana said. Her voice was steady, but her heart shook inside her chest. Gabriel nodded, solemnly. "I know." They sat across from each other at the reference table. Between them lay years of betrayal, of unanswered questions. "Helen told me," he said after a long silence. "The truth about Rosa, about everything." Eliana's eyes searched his face. She knew this whole time? He hesitated, then nodded. "Rosa was forced to leave. Helen said your mother—" "Rosa, she was blackmailed into disappearing. My grandfather feared scandal. Your existence didn't fit the image." The words landed like stones. Eliana folded her hands tightly, grounding herself. "So they erased her. Erased me." Gabriel's voice broke. "I'm sorry. For all of it. For not knowing. For not protecting you sooner." She looked away, blinking fast. "It's not your fault. You weren't the one who chose silence. But I need time, Gabriel, to process who I am and who I'm not." He reached across the table but stopped just short of her fingers. "Whatever space you need, I'll wait." That evening, Elias returned to her modest apartment. It was quiet, familiar. She needed that. Her fingers moved over the old photograph tucked inside her journal. Rosa, smiling with her as a baby, framed by the same gentle eyes she now saw in the Blackwell portraits. The next day, she visited the community center, where she volunteered twice a week tutoring scholarship students. Leo, a shy 15-year-old boy she had mentored for months, waited outside the classroom holding a notebook. "Miss Eliana," he said, "can I show you something?" Inside the notebook were pages filled with his handwriting, financial plans, budget goals, and a list of business ideas. At the bottom was a message: "You changed my life." Tears welled up again, but this time not from grief. "Leah, this is incredible," she whispered. He looked up at her. "I didn't think people like me had a future. But you made me believe I could have one." She knelt beside him. "You have more than a future, Leo. You have a voice, a vision. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Later that evening, as she sat alone on the library steps watching the sun dip below the skyline, her thoughts shifted from lineage to legacy. The Blackwell name had nearly broken her. Logan's words were drowned out, not completely. She wasn't just a hidden truth or a damaged bloodline. She was Rosa's daughter, a teacher, a guide, a light for kids like Leo. And maybe that was the real inheritance. Not the fortune, not the surname, but the ability to change lives. To give someone else the chance Rosa had fought to give her. Gabriel hadn't called all day. He was giving her space, respecting her boundary, and that, more than anything, made her believe he truly cared. Tomorrow, she would return his call. But tonight, she wrote her mother's name in her journal, 3 times, then her own. Not to claim power, but to honor survival. The next morning, Gabriel waited at the edge of the park where he lost several visitors before his feet again. He didn't bring flowers or prepared speeches, just quiet hope. When he saw her approaching, head down and hair tucked beneath a scarf, his heart thudded once before settling. She saw him, paused, then walked over slowly. "Oh, you'd be at the office," she said softly. "I couldn't sit behind a desk today, not knowing where your heart stood." Eliana took a breath. "It's torn, but not broken. I've spent so long searching for my past, I didn't realize I was already living my purpose." Gabriel's brow furrowed gently. "What do you mean?" She looked out at the trees swaying in the morning breeze. "Leo, the students, the late nights I spent helping them understand things no one ever explained to me. I'm proud of that. That's what feels real." Gabriel nodded. "I've seen it. You glow when you're with them. You teach them more than numbers. You teach them worth." A tear slipped down Eliana's cheek. "I was so focused on who left me behind, I forgot who stood by me all along. Mama Rosa. She gave up everything so I could have a shot, and now I owe it to her to live fully." He took a step closer. "You owe no one anything, Eliana. But what you give, it's more than any legacy could ever buy." She smiled through her tears. "I need time, Gabriel. Not to run, but to build. I want to open a learning center for kids like Leo, for people who feel unseen." Gabriel's eyes lit up. "Then let me help, not because of your name, because of your vision." She looked at him carefully. "Only if it's built on both our terms." He extended his hand. "Equal partners?" She hesitated for half a beat before placing her hand in his. "Equal hearts?" Weeks passed. The community rallied behind Eliana's idea. Gabriel pulled strings through the Blackwell Foundation, not to lead, but to quietly support. The old post office downtown was renovated into a vibrant space with books, computers, and art. Leo painted a mural along the back wall, a girl holding a lantern, lighting the way for others behind her. At the center's opening, Helen Blackwell arrived unexpectedly. Her face was sober, but not cruel. "You've built something remarkable," she said to Eliana. "I feared truth would ruin us, but it's made us human again." Eliana met her gaze. "I don't want your apology, just your honesty." Helen reached into her coat and handed over a delicate envelope. Inside was a letter, yellowed with time. It was from Margaret, to Rosa. "I wish I could keep her," it read, "but they won't let me. If she ever asks, tell her it wasn't because I didn't love her. It was because I loved her too much to let her carry my burden." Eliana folded the letter gently, pressing it to her chest. For the first time in her life, the silence behind her story had a voice, and that voice loved her. After the guests cleared out, Gabriel stayed behind. He found Eliana on the rooftop, overlooking the city lights. "You okay?" he asked gently. She turned to him. "I think, for the first time in a long time, I am." He leaned beside her. "I had this dream once, when I was younger, that our family name could mean something good. Not just wealth or power, but hope." Eliana looked at him, heart full. "Then maybe we give it new meaning, together." Below them, the sign on the building glowed under warm lights. "Cruz Blackwell Center for Hope and Heritage." Eliana whispered, "It's more than just a name now." Gabriel looked at her, then at the horizon. "It's a beginning." The morning sun filtered through the library's tall windows, casting soft golden lines over the reading tables and worn shelves. Eliana hadn't been back in weeks. She had needed time to breathe, time to separate Gabriel's affection from the haunting truths uncovered in the archives. But today, something pulled her back. Something gentle, but unshakable. She clutched her messenger bag to her side as she walked toward the back wing. It looked different now. New paint, restored stained glass, and a freshly planted courtyard just outside. But it wasn't the renovations that stopped her in her tracks. It was the sign etched in bronze above the arch. The Rosa Cruz Memorial Wing, where every story matters. Her breath caught. A tremble rose from her fingertips to her throat. She walked forward slowly, each step like stepping into a memory. When she reached the entrance, she saw it, the stone bench in the center of the garden, surrounded by marigolds and ivy. On the smooth curve of the bench, an inscription read, "Stories that never got told." Her knees gave in before her heart did. She sank down slowly, fingertips tracing the letters. A sob escaped her lips, not of grief, but of release. After all these years of wandering through unanswered questions and half-truths, someone had finally honored Rosa. Her mother in every way that counted. She turned. Gabriel stood in the archway, a soft look on his face, a small brass key in his hand. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said, stepping forward. "I almost didn't," she whispered, brushing tears from her cheek. "I didn't know if I belonged here anymore." Gabriel extended the key without a word. Eliana looked down and noticed the number etched into it. 1. The first key, the one that unlocked the library's heart. "Rosa gave you shelter," he said softly. "You gave the rest of us understanding. I had this made for you, and not just for the doors." Her fingers closed around the key, warm from his hand. "What else does it open?" He smiled faintly. "Me?" They stood there in silence for a moment, the breeze lifting strands of her dark hair, carrying the scent of blooming roses through the air. "I didn't build this just for her," Gabriel continued. "I built it because you made me see the world differently. The way you saw Leo, the way you carry stories in your hands like they're fragile treasures." Eliana blinked, heart aching in the best way. "And still you think I belong beside you?" I nodded, thinking. He said, "I know." From the garden's edge, faint music began to play. Someone had turned on the string lights and outdoor speakers. The glow from the bulbs danced over the cobblestones, reflecting in her tear-wet eyes. Without another word, Gabriel held out his hand. Eliana hesitated, then stood, placing the key gently in her coat pocket. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like a shadow trying to fit into someone else's light. She felt like the story itself. Like a name written in full. Like a gift finally given and received. She placed her hand in his, and they stepped into the light. They danced slowly beneath the canopy of fairy lights, surrounded by books and blossoms. No music dictated their steps, only the rhythm of old wounds healing and new beginnings unfolding. The garden had once been a forgotten patch behind the library. Now it bloomed with meaning. Eliana had once believed stories were meant to stay in books, shelved and untouched, but tonight she felt her story being written in the... She leaned her head gently against his shoulder. "I thought if I found the truth, I'd finally feel whole. But it wasn't just about finding where I came from, it was about finding where I could stay." Gabriel's voice was a whisper above the wind. "Then stay with me." She looked up at him, her eyes searching, not for promises, but for something deeper. Not as a secret, not hidden away. "Never again," he said. "You'll never be someone's shame." They paused beneath a rose-covered arch, where a lantern flickered, casting warm shadows on the walls of the building they both loved. Gabriel reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded letter. "There's something else." Eliana unfolded the letter carefully. It was from the Blackwell Foundation board. Her name was listed on the bottom, Eliana Cruz, Director of Literacy Outreach and Heritage Inclusion. She stared at it. "You were interrupted softly. You earned this. I just made sure they saw what I see." Eliana pressed the paper to her chest. This means more than you know," he replied, "because I've watched you fight for every page of your life." A group of teenagers passed through the garden path behind them, whispering and smiling. One of them, Leo, the scholarship student Eliana had mentored, paused when he saw her. "Eliana," he called, "they put your name on the wall inside. You're famous now." Eliana laughed. "Only if you keep studying." Leo grinned and ran to catch up with his friends. She turned back to Gabriel, wiping tears from her eyes. "He doesn't know what that moment just did for me." "Sure, he doesn't have to," Gabriel said. "You gave him a future. That's more than enough." They returned to the bench beneath Rosa's name. Eliana sat and reached for Gabriel's hand again. You know, I used to think Mama Rosa took me in to protect me, but now I think she did it because she believed in a future I couldn't see yet. A future. You gave you the start, Gabriel said, but you've built everything else. Eliana looked around the garden. Roses, lanterns, laughter in the distance, a bench with her mother's name. Maybe that's what love is, she whispered. Not just the blood that ties us, but the choices that heal us. Gabriel nodded, his gaze steady. Then I choose you. Eliana smiled, quietly, finally. Not the kind of smile worn for others, but one rooted deep in who she'd become. As the light swayed gently above them and the air filled with the scent of lavender and rain-soaked stone, they didn't speak again. They didn't need to. The garden spoke for them. A gift given, a name reclaimed. A future quietly unfolding over hand in hand. 1 year later, the old library looked nothing like it once had. Where dusty corners once gathered silence, laughter, and the soft hum of hope, now echoed through polished hallways. Sunlight poured through high windows onto rows of books, each spine carefully selected by the woman who now walked those aisles with purpose. Eliana Cruz adjusted a stack of children's storybooks in a wicker basket near the reading circle. She paused, pressing a hand gently to her heart, as a little girl climbed into the oversized beanbag, her small fingers flipping through a picture book titled, "The Girl Who Remembered the Rain." It was Eliana's first published book. She had signed the deal just 3 months earlier, using her full name for the first time. That name had taken a lifetime to earn, and even longer to embrace. Across the room, Gabriel Blackwell stood with quiet pride, watching her. He didn't wear a suit today, just rolled-up sleeves and a wrinkled tie. He looked out of place amid the rows of bright-colored posters and story rugs, but his eyes were fixed only on her. He rarely interrupted. Eliana's world had become something she had built on her own. It seemed he supported, not steered. "Ready?" a young voice whispered at her elbow. It was Leo. Now 16, the once shy boy stood straight in a pressed shirt, holding note cards and shifting nervously from one foot to the other. Eliana smiled and took a moment to straighten his collar. "You're going to be amazing," she whispered. He nodded, swallowing hard. As the small crowd gathered in the event room, Eliana took her seat beside Gabriel, who gently took her hand. Leo stepped up to the podium set in front of the new literacy mural, a painting of a tree made from open books, its leaves swirling into butterflies. The plaque beneath it bore the name, Blackwell Cruz Literacy Center, where every story finds its voice. The crowd quieted. Leo cleared his throat. "When I first met Miss Eliana, I thought reading was boring. I thought my story didn't matter. I thought I didn't matter." He paused, his voice trembling slightly. Eliana saw something in me, not because I was smart, not because I was confident, but because I showed up. A ripple of emotion moved through the room. Once told me, some of the best stories start with someone just showing up for the first time. And I did. And now, I believe I can write my own ending. Applause erupted, warm and lasting. Eliana's eyes shimmered as she rose to hug him. He clung to her for a second longer than expected, then smiled and joined the other students. After the ceremony, Eliana walked alone to the back corner of the room, where a framed announcement rested beside her new book. It read, "Eliana Cruz signed multi-book deal to publish children's literature focused on healing through heritage, literacy, and belonging." Gabriel joined her, slipping an arm gently around her waist. "I thought I'd feel afraid seeing my name next to yours," she said softly. He turned her toward him, brushing her cheek with his fingers. "You've never had to earn a name to be worthy of it, but I'm glad you chose it, because now it's part of the story you're writing." Eliana nodded. "Not just mine, ours." They stood there in silence for a moment, surrounded by books, laughter, and the future they had dared to believe in. And behind them, cast in gold across the entrance of the library, the words gleamed beneath a carved arch. Blackwell Cruz Literary Field, where every story finds its voice. Later that afternoon, the sun filtered through the stained glass windows as Eliana stepped into the storytelling room. A group of younger children sat cross-legged, looking up at her with wide, eager eyes. One little girl raised her hand. "Miss Eliana, is the girl in your story really you?" Eliana smiled, kneeling down so they were eye to eye. "In a way, yes. She's every kid who ever felt forgotten, but kept going anyway." The little girl beamed and whispered, "Then, I want to be like her." Gabriel watched from the doorway, his heart full. This wasn't just a program, it was a living tribute to the woman who had rewritten the meaning of legacy, not through bloodlines or old family wealth, but through choice, resilience, and love. As the children filed out, Eliana returned to her office. The desk wasn't large or fancy, but it held what mattered. Drawings from students, a photo of Mama Rosa holding her as a baby, and a signed copy of her first book beside a fresh stack of ideas. Stories waiting to be told. She sat and began writing a letter. Her handwriting was steady, thoughtful. "And Mama Rosa," it began. "Tata, they clapped for my story. They clapped because I found my voice, but what they don't see is that my voice started with yours. The lullabies, the bedtime stories, the silence when you gave up everything so I could have more. They think I'm strong, but really, I'm just walking the road you cleared with your love." Her hand trembled slightly as she signed the bottom, "Forever your daughter, Eliana." Just then, Leo knocked on the door, poking his head in shyly. "There's someone here to see you. She says she used to work with your mom." Eliana rose quickly, smoothing her blouse. A tall woman with gray-streaked hair waited outside. She introduced herself as a former nurse from the old hospital where Rosa had worked. "I just wanted to say thank you," the woman said, her voice cracking. "Rosa once helped me during the hardest year of my life. She gave without asking. Seeing you now, it's like she's still giving." Eliana reached for the woman's hand. "Then let's keep giving together." They embraced, and Gabriel quietly slipped out, leaving them space. Outside, he looked up at the sky, exhaling deeply. The weight of generations had shifted, not erased, but transformed. At dusk, Eliana and Gabriel walked the garden path behind the library. Fireflies blinked in the hedges. The dedication bench glowed softly under string lights. They sat in silence, side by side. "How do you think she'd be proud?" Eliana asked. Gabriel turned to her. "I think she'd be in awe." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "For a long time, I thought my story didn't matter. Now, I see it was just waiting for the right page." He took her hand. "Then let's keep writing it, together." In the final moments of the evening, children's laughter echoed from a classroom window. Books whispered with promise, and beneath the carved arch at the library entrance, one name glowed in the soft light. Blackwell Cruz Literacy Center, where every story finds its voice. Eliana paused beneath the sign, her fingers tracing the etched letters. Then, with Gabriel beside her and a sky full of stars above, she walked into the building that was once just a dream. Now, it was a home. And her name, her full name, wasn't just on the door. It was part of a legacy, built not on secrets or silence, but on truth, healing, and the stories that refused to be forgotten.